Hi everyone, so today we are going to be doing our first internet lecture. Today we're going to be talking about a few important terms and concepts that go specifically with ecology. So please feel free to take notes, to pause this video, and to rewind it as well. So first we're going to talk about food chain. So a food chain is the sequence of transfers of matter and energy in the form of food from an organism to another organism. A food chain always starts with the sun, and then it gives direct energy to plants. So these plants are actually called primary producers. Another word for this is called autotrophs. Producer, autotrophs. Both of these mean the exact same thing, meaning that they can make their own food. This is why plants are so important and why they start at the food chain after sun. This is also through a process called photosynthesis. It's something maybe you guys have talked about earlier in the year, pretty much being able to use sunlight to create nutrients or glucose in this matter. After the producers, we have consumers or heterotroph. So we have consumer, heterotroph. Both of these words, all they mean is that they can't make their own food. They must consume another organism in order to have that food. So depending on the food chain, we can also have a primary, a secondary, or a tertiary consumer, and it can go all the way throughout as many as possible. There is one important part of a food chain I have not talked about, and that is called a decomposer. A decomposer are organisms that break down dead organic matter and return the nutrients back to the soil. So examples of these are mushrooms, bacteria, any type of fungus specifically. They pretty much just eat the dead things that are on the ground, dead leaves, dead logs, that kind of stuff, and they take all that, they use the nutrients, and then they return all the nutrients back to the soil. Many times when looking at a food chain, it will also ask you what organisms are affected if one dies off. So looking at this example, we have a food chain. Let's say that our food chain has mice on it, and that's going to be right after plants or something like that. If all the mice die off, how are the rest of the organisms affected? Well, whatever the mouse ate is now going to have an increase in population because nothing's eating it. Whereas all the organisms after it that use the mice as a source of food are now going to die off because they don't have enough food to get the nutrients that they need. So this food chain is a very simple interaction between organisms. A more realistic approach is called a food web, and this is going to be a complex sequence of all food chains and all interacting and showing the transfer of matter and energy flow. Next, we're going to talk about symbiotic relationships. There are three symbiotic relationships: parasitism, commensalism, and mutualism. Parasitism sounds exactly what it sounds like, a parasite. So you have one organism that benefits and one that's harmed. A best example about this is a mosquito in a human or maybe a flea in a dog. Next one is mutualism, which sounds pretty much like mutual. This is when both organisms benefit. So an example of this would be there's a fish that connects itself to the bottom of sharks and manta rays. These are called remora. And they actually eat parasites and dead skin off the shark or the ray, and the shark or the ray actually protects this fish from other predators, making so you have a plus-plus relationship. And finally, commensalism. This is where one organism doesn't really benefit, but also isn't harmed as well, but the other organism does benefit. So for example, puffins and rabbits. Puffins actually use empty rabbit burrows for nesting purposes. Now that you've listened to all this and you've taken your notes, I want you to go to the Quizlet back on Google Classroom. And I would like you to do at least one or two Learn sections. I hope that this helps, and please see me in class if you need any help.